put this because I put this, where is it anyway? Where is that anyway? I put that because I was always asked that. As we moved around the country, I'd say I was from Elson Bay, Wisconsin. Where is that?
Louder, please.
So I often had to use my hand to say, Wisconsin shaped like your hand, and I live 5 miles from the end of the thumb. This evening I'll share 2 branches of my family tree, the Swedish and some of the Norwegian family that began in Elson Bay, and some of the businesses owned by family. What do you know about Elson Bay? I did this for another presentation I did, and I think it's kind of nice because they don't say the top of the thumb anymore. For some reason, the gateway to the top of the thumb. I never hear that anymore. But anyway, one of the things we're going to be talking about or to notice is Branch. I had circled Branch Lane, and that's kind of an important part of my talk tonight. Andrew Johann Wickman immigrated to the United States in 1872. His father had died when he was about 6, and his mother remarried. And in about 1870, his stepfather came to the United States, hoping for better financial conditions. Pleased with the opportunities he found, and hoping for future success, he sent for his wife and family. Andrew came with his mother and step-sibling in 1872. In a biography that was written about him in a book by Holland, it did not mention any sibling, and it didn't mention the name of his stepfather. So I had to do a little research. His mother's name was Martha Winroth. His father's name was John Anderson. I am not sure where the Wickman name came in, because the way that they did it in Scandinavian, he was a son of John, it should have been Johnson. But it is Wickman. Then I found his mother, in looking at immigration lists, I found that she had married a man by the name of Lemon. And I'm not sure Lemon sounds very Swedish either, but I really don't know much about that side of the family. She traveled with 1 son and 4 daughters. The family settled in Iowa, but Andrew had other plans, as his girlfriend and her family had come to Elson Bay on the same ship. So the next year, we find him in Elson Bay. And he worked first at a boarding house in Gills Rock for about 3 months, and then purchased 138 acres of land in Elson Bay from Elias Gill, who was the owner of that boarding house, and for whom Gills Rock was named. On June 29, 1873, Andrew married Sarah Ostrand by the Justice of Peace, J. Rogers, and witnessed by John Carlson and Isaac Williams Randall. Sarah came with her mother and sibling. Lucky for me, my mother was given this certificate from a friend who had purchased a frame at a yard sale with a picture in it. And when she took the picture out, this certificate was behind. And my mother was the only one she knew that had the name Wickman. And I'm delighted to have it. John Eliasson from Denmark immigrated in about 1855, settling in Ephraim, and then began purchasing land in Elson Bay area. He kept on accumulating land until he owned 8,000 acres in various parts of Door County. He concentrated on developing this area, and he advertised for settlers to come here. He did not learn for 2 years that Elson Bay had been named after him until he saw it on a government surveyor's map. Eliasson was instrumental in advertising in the Scandinavian countries for people to come, that land was cheap and it was great for farming. I don't think he knew about the rocks we have here. It is possible that this is how Andrew Wickman and the Ostrom family found out about it. I really don't know. In these scenes in Elson Bay, Ruckert's store, which is the one where the vehicle is coming, and then it's on. Oh, now I'm gonna need. Ruckert's store was built in 1900, and the hotel down the road, the Desjardins Hotel, was in 1902. I really don't have any early photos of Sarah and Andrew, but treasure the ones I do have. Here is the family. I'll be mostly mentioning three of them besides Andrew and Sarah. The boy on the right is my grandfather, Alfred, and the one on the left is Gilbert. And then the one with the star on is Sarah Wickman Miller. This is the first home. The first home was a two-room log house where they had 8 children between 1974 and 1874 and 1892. In 1895, Andrew built this larger home on the property at the end of Ranch Lane. It is still there and it has been remodeled. And Sarah and Andrew lived there until they retired in 1917. This is the home today. I took this picture on Saturday. And it is owned by the Popel family. The house today was sold in the 50s to the Rogers family, and then to the Nelson family, and now it is owned by the Popel family. So it has only gone to 4 families in this home. It's beautiful down there. Alfred Wickman married Agnes Larson, daughter of John and Karen Tosterson Anderson, on the 5th day of October in 1911. This is my grandparents. Alfred and Agnes and their children lived on the farm until Alfred died in 1933. Grandma was pregnant with her 8th child when he died at 43. Alfred and Agnes here are the 8 children that Alfred and Agnes had. My father, Lawrence, is in the back row next to the end on the right side. And the first one on the right side is Paul, and I will be mentioning him later in the presentation. As I said before, Alfred died in 1933, several months before his last son was born. In 1917, Andrew retired and built a smaller home at the entrance of Ranch Lane. I need another man. This is the home today, and it is still owned by a family member, great-granddaughter Sharon and her husband Bob Davison. As I said, I don't have any earlier photos of Andrew and Sarah, so there are still some of the same ones around that same home at the end of at the beginning of Ranch Lane. The family times, I'm told that several of the family members had wonderful singing voices. And of course, Andrew, you can see here, is playing the accordion. Unfortunately, none of that was passed on to me. Tragedy in 1924 struck the family. The oldest son, John, who was a fisherman, and while out lifting nets on the Ponnet boat, fell in the water. His son Leslie and brothers-in-law, Oscar and Herbert Knudsen, tried to rescue him by jumping in. But a grappling hook finally put to use by the Coast Guard was the only means of recovering the body. This was a double tragedy for his children, as his wife had died 1 year and 5 months before him. 5 children were left without their parents. The youngest was 14. Andrew died in 1935, and the land was signed over to his older daughter, Sarah Miller. Sarah and Louise had lived in Chicago for many years, and after their father died, came home and decided that it would be a good investment to make the 2-story home into apartments. My grandma Agnes was living there, and she had to move to Sister Bay. my Uncle Polly told me that he and Wallace walked the cow to Sister Bay. Some years later, Sarah and Louise felt a bit guilty for having my grandmother have to move away from the farm. So they added on to the original 2-bedroom log home. And I believe this is what this is. This was after they moved the house off. So I'll show you what it looks like today though too. This photo is from 1950 when the land was finally divided and Grandma got an acre of land down Ranch Lane toward closer to town. They moved the newer part and left the log building, which I remember was the bedroom, part of the kitchen. This is what it looks like today. That is that same that was that piece of building. They've taken it, made it into the log again. And the barn is the original log barn. It's had the lean part added to it, and then it's had siding put on it. But it actually is the original barn from the 1800s. Here's my grandma's house. It shows when they moved her house down closer to the beginning of Ranch Lane and closer to town. This is when I think the land was finally signed over to the different family members. Maybe this is what happened back in those days. I don't know, they just built on their father's land and I don't know who paid the taxes, but that's not my problem. After it was set on the foundation, there was a addition made to it, which included a kitchen, a bathroom, and an entranceway. Neither one of my great-grandma Lena lived with her too, and neither one of them drove a car. So as a teenager, I could get to drive the car. I picked them up for church, took them on errands, and it was fine. Except sometimes I didn't dare tell them I was going to Sturgeon Bay because they wanted to go along. They'd always try and get along. I want to say on the note on the top, the photo on the left-hand side, you'll see the Elson Bay Lodge in the distance. Of course, that's the former Wickman house. This is what my grandmother's house looks like today. There were trees in front of the cars. It has had a more addition to the back, but it's interesting. It still looks pretty much like it did. Charlie Anderson married Amanda Wickman. And in the early 1900s, he built a 3-story home on the land of his father-in-law. I might add, hopefully, but not to confuse everyone, that Charlie is the brother of my grandma Agnes Wickman's mother, Lena Anderson Larson. This is my Norwegian side of the family, and both Charlie and my great-grandma Lena were born in Norway and immigrated in the late 1800s. Brother-in-laws Charlie Anderson and Gilbert Wickman, who was the youngest son, traded buildings in 1920. Gilbert got the 3-story home on Mink River Road on the Wickman property, and Charlie got the meat market that's on Garrett Bay Road. Actually, Charlie lived kind of kitty corner across from there, and I guess that's why he wanted it. But Gilbert had started that meat market in 1913 with the help of his father, Andrew. As you notice on this picture, the meat market, and then it's Plinky Garage, and then there's another building. So this is actually before, this photo was taken actually before the highway went, 42 went north. I think they went Garrett Bay to get to Gills Rock. This is what the meat market looks like today, and then there's Plinky's Garage, which is owned by the Liberty Grove Historical Society. On to the Elson Bay Lodge. Gilbert and his wife, Olga, built both sides of the 3-story home and opened the Elson Bay Lodge in the early 1920s. Guests stayed there under the American plan with 3 meals a day, including the price of lodging. Many stayed 2 weeks and some stayed a full month. Olga Olson Wickman did all the cooking for the guests. The lodge was open Memorial Day to Labor Day. Note the calendar on the wall. It's hard to see, but it says, not very clear, but it says June 1954. Her summer was just beginning. This was her summer job, as she was an English teacher at Gibraltar High School. Yes, I did have her as a teacher. And many thought she was my grandmother. I didn't dare not have my lessons ready, or she would say, Nyla, I was home last night. You could have come up, and I would have helped you. If any of you went to Gibraltar High School, you probably had her as an English teacher. She actually taught on Washington Island also. And my Uncle Gilbert used to say, she taught law. And he used to say, she wants to be the richest woman in the cemetery. She just kept working. Coming into Elsa Bay on the Garrett Bay Road, you know where that is, you can see in the distance the Elsa Bay Lodge, and you can also see where the meat market was that Gilbert and Charlie traded. Here's the entrance of Mink River Road to the Elsa Bay Lodge, and this is taken in 1938. I remember playing with their granddaughter, Mary, and we would climb up and sit on the stone entrance and tell stories. I did some other things too, I don't know. Anyway, 4 hotel units were also added to that property. Guests arrived by bus and also by car. If you look real close, most of the license plates are from Illinois. I read in one of the also made notes in the Door County Advocate that Gilbert had gone to Chicago and came back with reservations for the summer from Illinois people. Where did he do that? During Elsa Bay Lodge days, weddings were held there, and the porch was also a favorite place for pictures, sitting, reading, and just sitting. My oldest sister, Joanne's wedding was held there on June 9th, 1951. Guess who that is on the bottom photo on the right, looking bored. And then I love my mother's hat. She has that white feather. That was my mother. And then I'm looking at Papa. That wedding was at 7 o'clock, and the dinner was after. And women wore hats. We don't wear that much now. Popular at that time was a chivalry, and for the newlyweds. People not invited to the wedding would come with pots and pans and bring the bang on them and maybe even sing and just make a lot of noise. And this was fun for the bride and groom, yes, but money was given to the group to shut them up or to get them to leave, to go and have a treat, and it was from the bride and groom. This is 4 generations. My great-grandmother, Lena Larson, my grandma Agnes Wickman, my father Lawrence Wickman, and my sister Joan Wickman Carlson. Some ads I found in the newspaper. I think the most interesting one is the one from 1932. It's where it says, for rent or sale, the Elsa Bay Lodge. I'm wondering if Aunt Olga was just tired of cooking. I wouldn't blame her. But in 1949, finally the lodge was up for sale, listed with a realty company. But it wasn't sold until 1971. But after it was sold, it had several different names. The first people kept the name. It was sold to some people by the name of Jensen, who ran it for just a couple years. Then sold and became the Griffin Inn. The Griffin Inn had several owners using that same name. Then there was a time that it was T. Ashwell's. And then a few years ago, it was purchased by a a couple of young men, and they named it the Wickman House. And it's probably the most popular name that people think of today. And I think one of the reasons when I was thinking about doing this program, I really wanted to say it was not where the Wickman family lived. There was a Wickman family there, but it was not the original Wickman family. It was just on their land. But it also was quite an honor to the family for them to have the name, the Wickman name. And now, of course, it's been sold again, and it is an Italian place, and I don't remember the name of what the Italian place was. But I understand it's very good food. This is my mother and dad when they got married in 1931. My father worked at first at the Elson Bay Orchards, and then he drove truck hauling fish to Chicago for Anderson Transportation. This company was owned by Charlie Anderson, his uncle, and it was located on Garrett Bay Road. It was sold to Olson Transportation Company in the early 40s. The building is still standing, and it's had many different businesses, including storing fish, potatoes, and there was also a resale store called Serendipity in there. The Birch Branch Furniture Store, and that's pictured on the lower right. And now it is home to Island Cider. It's quite a history. This building was located behind the Viking Grill, and it was built in the 1930s by Gilbert and Alfred Wickman, and became a box factory, making cherry lugs, apple boxes, and fish boxes for shipping the fish to the cities. I one time did a thing on my great-grandmother at a cemetery walk, and we talked about this. I'm wondering if Gilbert Wickman and Charlie Anderson, who were brother-in-laws, kind of were in cahoots. Gilbert built the boxes for the fish that Charlie's companies sent to Chicago or to the cities. In 1950, an addition was made for manufacturing kitchen cabinets, but that didn't last too long because in 1960, it was sold to the Leroy Lumber Company. In 1967, it was purchased by Harold and Marion Smith, who also purchased the Cedar Grove cottages that were just around the corner on the water. That also had been owned by Charlie Anderson. And then it sat for a number of years without anything in it. And when they had that explosion in Elson Bay in 2006, it was severely damaged, but it has been rebuilt. And I believe it's rentals in it now. At the lodge, people kept asking where they could get a sandwich or ice cream cone or something short. So Gilbert Wickman decided to build the Viking Grill. It was located on the corner of Highway 42, and we always called it the Beach Road, but now it's called Cottage Road. He had 2 daughters in college and thought they could run it in the summer. So it was run by his family in the summer or 2 with the help of their aunt, Magdalene Klinke. And then it was rented to John and Frances Kapinski for a summer. My mom and dad, Gilbert's nephew, began running it in about 1946. There was not a lot of interest in the daughters running the Viking Grill. They were busy with college, getting married, and starting their own lives. So Gilbert approached my parents and said, well, they should give it a try. With a family of 5, 4 girls and 1 boy, they would have a lot of help. Thanks, Gilbert. So my parents, like I said, ran the Viking Grill for a year in 1946 and purchased it in 1947. They put an addition on the back of 8 feet to expand the living quarters in the back. Before that, to get upstairs, we had to go through the restaurant. And I was 4, and my brother was 2 when the parents started the Viking Grill. and my sisters were 9, 12, and 14. Quick, just a minute. Because my dad had been a herring choker, meaning that he fished on the ice for herring in the winter, and a transporter of fish for 14 years, they decided to have fish as their specialty. Pan-fried trout had been fish of choice, but had become very sparse. But whitefish was plentiful, so they hoped people would like it. I've been told by one of the girls, my sisters, that Daddy had told my sisters that they shouldn't tell people that they were eating whitefish, not trout. No one would know the difference. Well, one of my sisters said, "Daddy, you told us never to lie." And they didn't. Actually, whitefish became very popular. My mother was the cook and made everything from scratch. I kind of laughed when I was writing this on something else I did years back. Everything was from scratch, but I think back in 1946, you couldn't buy everything pre-made like you can today. So that was the only thing she knew how to do. But she made all the pies, the rolls, the soups, all the specials for the day. Sometimes she had even wait on people, cook, serve, and clear the tables. Mother always said she learned a lot from customers. One suggested taking the bone out of the fish, and Daddy, always willing to please, had someone show him how to do it. I can still see him filleting fish. He always made it look so easy, and he could get that bone out of there without any meat on it. Unbelievable. But he sharpened his knife, very sharp. Another customer asked for whitefish broiled, and Mom, unsure how to do it, invited the customer into her kitchen to show her how. After that, most fish served were broiled. Her whitefish sandwich was wonderful. I have a cute story about my mom. One customer came into the restaurant one morning and asked Mom if she had any snails. Mom, thinking he wanted bait for fishing, told him he would have to go over to Morris Newman's garage for that. What he really wanted was a sweet roll, but Mom had never heard them called snails. Christmas at the Viking Grill. Now, the Viking Grill is the only home I really ever knew. We always had the family on both sides at Christmas Eve at the restaurant. We actually looked pretty happy on this photo, and that was probably taken before they served the lutefisk. Of course, we were all smelling it before that. The adults loved it, but I never even tried it till much later in life, and it was okay. The jukebox was very popular in the restaurant, and this is back when it was just a little restaurant of Naughty Pine. And we had booths, and in that booth there was my brother and I and 3 of our cousins. What fun we had. The booths are now at the Liberty Grove Historical Society. Mom had them in her garage, and we took them up there. This is my brother Larry up by one of the signs in the front by the highway. And then the other picture, wow, we really had a lot of snow. I don't get that anymore. In 1959, an addition was added to the restaurant, making the dining room larger. I laughed when I found this ad. If you look close, it says, our dining room seats 500 people, 25 at a time. I think that had to be my mother's humor. I found it after she was gone. The next addition was made to the kitchen on the other side of the restaurant. Here's a couple shots of the inside of the restaurant. They're just not very good, but that was part of a Christmas card one year. My parents, on the left is my parents in about 1959. In 1970, my husband was transferred to Hawaii, and he went by Navy ship from Philadelphia. So of course the girls and I had to fly, but we spent some time in Nelson Bay before going. In this picture are Susan and Stacy behind the counter. I couldn't resist. They're both here with me tonight. Susan is the older, and Stacy is the one sitting in the high chair. And by the way, Stacy has a birthday today. She was one there. So you can take 1970 and figure out how old she is today. I won't tell. The fish boil. It all began in 1961 in Nelson Bay at the Viking Grill. This was one of the ads they had in the paper. They were one of the first commercial fish boils. They were not the first, but they were one of the first. In the 1960s, as the family was growing, the need to create more business was considered. The first thought was a motel in the backyard, but my mother put her foot down. She said, not making beds and cooking too. Fish boils had been held by different groups, and many times things were borrowed from the restaurant. They had the room in the backyard, so maybe they should try it, and they decided to do it. The kettle was made of Speed Queen stainless steel washing machine tub with a hole welded shut, and the baskets were made in the shipyard. A fire cedar slabs blazed under the kettle, half filled with water. When the water is boiling, a basket containing small scrub potatoes is lowered into the pot. 5 pounds of salt is dumped into the water. And after 10 to 12 minutes, depending on the size of the potatoes, small peeled onions are spread over the potatoes. Then another basket, fitted precisely inside the first basket, but not resting on the potatoes and onions, goes into the boiling water. This basket contains 3-inch chunks of whitefish. More salt is added to the kettle, and the pot is again brought to a boil. After the baskets, there's some excess water that after they put the baskets in, there's excess water they take off so that the water doesn't boil over and put the fire out. Exactly 12 minutes later, it is splashed over the kerosene is splashed over the fire, causing the pot to overboil. The timing is very important. Daddy always had someone with him to help him keep time. He had a habit of loving to talk to people. And maybe he has passed that on to his youngest daughter. Stand back, get ready to add the kerosene, then the overboil. As the flames soar skyward, scum formed from the cooking fish and potatoes is flushed from the churning water. This is always the highlight of the fish boil. Get ready, it's a Kodak moment. Get those cameras snapping. Ooh, you hear all kinds of clapping and whatever. The baskets of fish, potatoes, and onions are removed from the pot and taken to the serving table. Everyone receives 2 pieces of whitefish, potatoes, onions, and everything drenched in melted butter. Mom's homemade coleslaw, pumpernickel and white bread, lemon wedges, pickles, cherry pie, and choice of a beverage. At first, Mom made coffee in the large enamel pots and added egg to the grounds. This is Swedish-style coffee. The egg helps clarify the coffee, allowing the grounds to separate from the water easily. The result was light, clear coffee with absolutely no bitterness or acidity. A velvet texture that was easy to drink. As more people started to come to the fish boils, this became impossible because that was done inside where she was also making dinners to serve in the restaurant. So they brought out the electric coffee pots. Mom also tried the first year to make all the cherry pies, but it was so much work. And as she was cooking in the restaurant and making all the desserts and things were in there, she just could not keep up. So the next year, and from then on, all the pies came from Rudy's Bakery in Sister Bay, and also all the breads came from there too. My mother's father, Nikolai Nelson, loved to help. My father's mother, Agnes Wickman, gave out the cherry pie. Everyone worked. Most of the ladies serving were retired ladies from Nelson Bay. On a busy night, 300 to 400 people could be served. Over the years, many articles appeared in newspapers and magazines about the Viking fish boils. Bus tours included a stop at the Viking, and those who came liked it so much they told others. In 1973, a letter from the Gimbel's department store in Milwaukee that my dad had, they wrote to say how much they had enjoyed the fish bowl and would like to come again in '74, hoping that the $3 per person was still offered. Grandchildren were involved, some working hard and some just having fun. The little one on the top on the right is here today at the table, the one hauling wood, and she's also with her 3 cousins. They're hauling her someplace, I don't know where. The lines were long. Not sure I would like to stand in a line like that today. How about you? The last addition made by my parents was to the north side where they added the different entranceway and bathrooms. My dad, Lawrence Wickman, died in his sleep on June 21st, 1973. He was only 61 years old. One of the last things he did before he peacefully laid down for a nap and never woke up again was to put a railing up by a step in the garage by the fish boil. He had been so afraid somebody would fall. Because of his love for the fish boil, Mom had founder of the Viking fish boil engraved in his tombstone. My mother ran the restaurant another year and sold it in the fall of 1974 to Phil and Rosemary Voigt. They ran it for 10 years, and then Dan Peterson purchased it, and he just sold it in 2022. It is now the Blue Bear, and I understand there are 3 businesses that are within that building. One is out in the garage, and 2 are, and they run, one is in the morning and one is at night. And they serve wonderful Italian food. And on this picture is how the Viking grill, also known as the Viking, looked when it was sold in 1974. The Elson Bay Lodge and the Viking Grill are no longer owned by a Wickman, but Sturgeon Bay has Wickman Two Brews, owned by a great-great-grandson, Jeff Yankee. His grandfather was Paul Wickman, my dad's brother. Thank you for letting me share my family history. Does anyone have any questions? And I have a hard time hearing, so somebody's going to have to help me. Will you? Okay, Trudy.
Nyla, was the restaurant open year-round in those years that your family had it?
Which one? Which one?
The Viking.
Was it when my parents had it?
Yes.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Very much so. And that's why a lot of times my mom was there working alone, because my dad would haul the mail from the Elson Bay Post Office to the Washington Island Ferry. So a lot of times when we were in school, she would, yeah. She worked very, very hard. Yes. And that was why, well, they just felt they needed more. You know, we always talked about, when I was a kid, when I was a kid growing up, and say in the 50s, Labor Day, we would be so busy. We'd have serving breakfast and maybe lunch. But by 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you actually could shoot a cannon down the street because everybody left. Everybody went back to the city. It's different now. More people stay year-round. They're here. And I don't know if the Blue Bear is open year-round, but my parents were always open year-round. Yes. Yes.
Now, back in the day, did steamships come to Ellison Bay, do you know?
Yes, yes. I believe so. And I was just reading about that the other day. I think they went to Marinette and then came across. And I know I've been told that a lot of people came to Ephraim. A lot of the immigrants came to Ephraim. But there was people that came to Ellison Bay too. There was a long dock there. John Eliason had one, and the Rookers had one, and when I was growing up, it was just parts of it, but now it's a big dock again. But yeah, I don't know what comes now. But yes, they did come to Ellison Bay. Sister Bay, Ellison Bay, Ephraim.
Yeah, who owned the restaurant when they made the movie Feed the Fish? Did Tony Shalhoub?
I believe Phil Voigt was the owner of that. Either Phil or Danny, I can't remember, one or the other.
Have you ever had a chance to meet him? Tony
I'm sorry?
Shalhoub? Have you met Tony? Because I heard he's got a cottage up in that area.
Yeah. Big house.
No, I have not met him, but I know where the place was where they did that filming of the home. It's halfway to well, it's almost to Gills Rock. It's right on the highway on the left-hand side. And I have never met him, but I know my two nephews that grew up in Gills Rock played with him when they were kids. So, Rick and Randy played with him, yeah. Yes.
I don't know if I was reading it right back here. Did the one picture of Gilbert say Gilbert for sheriff? Is he running for sheriff?
No, he never became a sheriff. He just ran for sheriff. You mean Gilbert here, what I have on? Is that what he said? Yeah. No, he never became a sheriff, but he ran for sheriff. And I know Andrew was involved in some politics too, and the daughters were involved during Prohibition, and there's all kinds of things. If you ever want to look up anything on your family, all the newspapers that were ever produced in York County from 1862 to 1979 are online, and they're free to search. It's incredible what you can find. But sometimes if you have a real common name, Nelson, Anderson, Johnson, it's very hard to do. But it's fun. We never asked our grandparents, I never asked my grandparents a lot of things. When I found my family, this is on my mother's side in Norway, the ones that came here, I never asked. My grandfather had come when he was a very small child, but he must have known something over the years about the family that was there. Never asked him. He lived to be 96 years old. When I started, was after he was gone. So I am my kids are going to have tons of stuff. Most of it may just go to recycle, but I've been researching for a long time on my family. So, and I helped my son-in-law too. So, anything else? Yeah.
Did you or your siblings ever consider taking over the restaurant?
I never. No, I could never do that. My one sister, the third girl, Gloria, probably could have done it. But no, they didn't. And my brother did too, work there quite a bit, but I think Gloria would be the only one capable of it. But no, it makes me so happy to drive past it with tons of cars around it. And my mom isn't there working. She worked very hard, put in lots of hours, but she never complained. Yes?
When you said you served 300 people in a night, how practically could you do that? I mean, how many fish boils does it take to serve 300?
Well, it's even funnier is we have a video at the Historical Museum. I did a video, my cousin did it for me. We had a 8mm film that my cousin put on a disc for us, and it says in there, one night they served 700 people. Now, I guess I got that from, I don't know where I got that from, but one of my sisters said to me, 700? There's about 50 people can be fed with one pot of fish. So, and he always had 2 going. So think about 700. But that might have come from when they had bus trips. And they usually were like at noon. And then you'd have fish boil at night. And I've seen some things, I've got newspaper clippings from the Journal and from Milwaukee Journal, the Chicago Tribune. People didn't have 74, 75, 70, 80 people on the bus. So, or there'd be 2 buses. So it could have been possible, but I think 300 wasn't too much to serve. Yes.
Was the fish boil a local recipe, or was it brought over from Europe?
Oh no, it was local. In fact, I think my dad went over to Washington Island too, because they were doing it over there. And you know, there's Wickmans on Washington Island, and we're not related to them. Like there's Wickmans here too. We're only related to one here. So I think no, it was the story that I've always heard about the fish boil is it could have started with the lumberjack, or the more logical one is the fisherman. Fishermen would go out for a day fishing, and they always had the pot-belly stove on the boat, and they would take potatoes and onions and maybe carrots with them, and they'd boil fish and boil it all together. So, but I think the recipe is only water and salt. And it's a lot of salt. And then, you know, there's a lot of people that salt it afterwards. So, does the salt boil over? I don't know. Dr. Mallory, tell me that. Does it boil off?
Was it always whitefish?
Yes. Well, early I said something about when they started the restaurant, trout was the most popular thing. And I think trout lamprey had kind of gotten at the trout. And the trout became pretty extinct. So then they had whitefish plentiful, and they served that. And my dad always said afterwards, he always said he would never put a trout in his fish boil pot because it would spoil all the fish in the pot. I don't know. That's just an old thing. But also, I just recently heard that there's lamprey again getting at the whitefish now. So something happened during COVID, where everything else happened during, or it's an excuse that it happened during that time, and something was done wrong, and then what is it? They're back attacking the whitefish. Anything else? Good. Thank you all for coming, and